Torage Warrior here, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about arms versus Fury. I've been having a lot of people ask me questions about, arms versus Fury for both PvE and PvP. So we're going to talk about some of the similarities and differences and advantages and disadvantages to both specs today. So in order to kind of compare differences here, I've thought of 5 categories to sort of break things down into. Mobility, which is how fast the spec moves and how well it is able to get out of crowd controls. It's the spec's crowd control of capabilities, the damage output of the spec, the burst output of the spec, and the utility. So for mobility, right now I would say the Fury tree has the advantage as far as mobility goes. Because for arms, although you can charge in combat, you can charge and then stance to intercept. So that's 2 sort of charges you can get in there. Whereas with Fury, you have the you can still charge, but you can't do it in combat. If you're clever, you can still get away with it, and that gives you a serious advantage if you're able to do it. But it can also hurt you if you are not able to do it. So Fury also has Heroic Fury, which lets you get out of any mobilization effect and refreshes the cooldown on intercept. So you can still intercept twice if you don't get the charge off, but if you do get the charge off, you can sort of charge, intercept, as well as getting out of crowd controls. Arms, you can kind of use Blade Storm to get out of that, but it's a longer cooldown, and it's kind of a waste to use it on, since it's such a good damage cooldown. It's kind of a waste to use it just to get out of roots, whereas Heroic Fury, usually when you're rooted, they get distance on you, is the time when you'd want to use that anyway, so to get rid of the roots and then intercept again. So that, I would say, is much more useful than having that, as well as Juggernaut actually right now increases the cooldown on charge, whereas Skirmisher reduces the cooldown on intercept, as well as the PvP set bonus also reduces the cooldown on intercept. Now, right now Fury already has the advantage, and in the next patch, what they're talking about is actually nerfing the mobility of arms even further. By making intercept and charge share a cooldown. Now they are giving charge a stun, which adds even more control, but it's not going to make up for the fact there will be some classes there are some classes right now that arms warriors can only beat because they can double charge, and those classes are going to be far more difficult from now on if those changes go through. Now for crowd control, or just control in general, arms definitely has the advantage here, and that is because arms has throwdown. Throwdown is just a straight up 5-second stun, and there's a lot of usefulness out of that. Now as far as other just control goes, Fury has a few neat things for it, but it's not anything spectacular. I mean, they do have Die by the Sword, which I guess can give you control in a fight just by pairing lots of things, but it's not as defined, it's not as definite as Throwdown, Improved Hamstring, as well as having Deadly Calm in there, so you can have those moments where you may not have the rage, where you need the rage, so you can just go on. It just makes it so you can't run out of rage for 10 seconds. So arms definitely has the control, the benefit as far as control. Now, for damage, both specs have always been relatively close, but arms Fury has sort of held the upper end as far as overall damage output. And right now, they're actually very close. There's actually a lot of arms DPS warriors and raids now that are performing very well. Arms has an advantage on sort of AoE over Fury even. But as far as damage output, both specs are actually pretty close as overall. Now for burst, you can sort of have burst if you line things up right with Deadly Calm, the Throwdown, and if you get good procs in there, you can put out good amount of burst with arms, but for the advantage, Fury definitely has the advantage for burst. Just because they have the active ability Raging Blow in there, which is just a huge nuke on top of Bloodthirst that is already a huge nuke as well, and then your basic Heroic Strike. Just the pairing of those three together is just an incredible amount of burst. So Fury definitely has the advantage as far as burst goes, as well as having the Death Wish talent there and having Intensify Rage, which lets you use your Recklessness and Death Wish more often. Now for utility, which spec would really just depend on what you find more useful and what situations you are sort of need things the most. They both have great utility things. Now, I'm only counting ones below the top tier here because things like Piercing Howl or Deep Wounds are things that you can definitely get in the other spec because you can sort of use your dip talents to get them. Now, but Arms has its sort of big utility here is having Sudden Death, which lets you get more Colossus Smashes, and Colossus Smash do a lot more damage during Colossus Smash, of course, because it ignores armor. And also Blood Frenzy. This would be sort of your also raid utility here. It would be your bleeds cause the target to bleed to take an extra 4% physical damage and 30% bleed damage in addition to your auto attacks, having a 10% chance to generate 20 additional rage, is a pretty nice utility in there. And there's a lot of other things in there as well that make it very handy, as well as Taste for Blood. That's not really a utility, that's more of a core damage thing, but Sweeping Strikes is also very nice. There's a lot of good utility things in Arms, as well as Fury. In Fury, we've got Die by the Sword is a really nice sort of PvP utility in there, as well as Piercing Howl. And they both have, it really is preference, depending on, both of them have good PvP and PvE utilities. So, right now, it's typically Arms has always been this is the PvP spec, Fury is the PvE spec. And they've tried a lot of times to blur that line, and typically is what happens is they just make one spec better for both if they don't try to make them separate. That was the case at the very beginning of Wrath, where they actually made Fury was better for everything because of the way Titan's Grip worked. Fury was better for PvE and PvP. And there's also been times where there's a brief time in Ulduar where Arms was best for PvE and PvP. But right now is probably the closest they've ever come to having both specs being good for both. It really just depends on what you want more. Now, I know I gave mobility and burst and to the advantage to Fury, and then the crowd control advantage to Arms, and then as far as overall damage and utility, they were about even. So looking at just that, Fury has more sort of categories where it's got the advantage, but in a small situation like Arena with a small number of players, that crowd control can be a lot more important than the extra burst or the mobility. And it's really debatable. Right now, I would say I would have for PvP wise, I would say Fury is probably maybe a bit better for Battlegrounds, and Arms would be a bit better for Arena. And in PvE, I would actually put them as a matter of preference, either or. They're both very good for raid DPS right now. They both have their good utility thing with Blood Frenzy, and then Fury has Rampage, which is the crit bonus. They both have ways to help your raid. And it's really just whichever you decide. So I hope that kind of enlightens you about which spec to choose. And yeah, good luck.